Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? There's a little raise hand feature at the top or bottom of your screen. And if you can hear me, just pop that up so I know you're there. My name is David Berga, and I'll be your host for this session. This session is called Imagine It Presents Fold Lite with the Kitchener Public Library and will run until 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. At the end of the panel, we'll have a literary trivia on Cahoots. The winner will receive books by today's authors, so we hope you'll stay on and join us. We did a trial run of it yesterday. It was super fun. You can download the app now, or you can open it in a separate browser on a different device, so you can look at two screens. We are pleased to offer closed captioning technology for today's session and all our sessions this weekend. We want to thank the Kitchener Public Library and the Imagine It Fund for sponsoring this event. The fold takes place on the ancestral, traditional, and unceded Indigenous territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the traditional homeland of the Wendat, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee nations. As a festival, we are dedicated to continuing to increase our own awareness, understanding, and conscientious action. If you are joining us today and you are not Indigenous, we'd like to encourage you to think about the first inhabitants of the place where you are living. How can you embrace the role of listener and learner as you learn about matters involving land and reconciliation? This virtual space is meant to be a safe space for all guests and panelists. We have closed the chat function to avoid disruption, but feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to ask questions of our moderators and panelists. It is my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Jael Richardson. Jael is the artistic director and founder of The Fold and an author herself. She'll appear on your screen with our panelists once each author has done their reading. Each author will read for 2 minutes, followed by a group discussion. Once the session is over, I'll come back with a few final housekeeping items before the trivia event. For now, please enjoy readings by Taya Lim, Sonia Lally, and Kinesia Lubrin. Please. Oh.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to read to you right from the beginning of my book, An Ocean of Minutes. September 1981. People wishing to time travel go to Houston Intercontinental Airport. At the orientation, the staff tell them that time travel is just like air travel. You even go to the same facility. People used to be apprehensive about airline travel too. But when you arrive at the airport, it is not the same at all. Before you can get within a mile of the terminals, you reach a bus stop moored at the edge of a vast concrete flat where you must leave your vehicle and ascend a snaking trolley like the ones they have at the zoo. A quarantine taxi makes its way to that lone bus stop, the airport appearing through a million chain-link diamonds. The driver is encased in an oval of hermetically sealed plexiglass. In the back seat, Frank is wearing a yellow hazmat suit. The color marks him as infected. Now is the time for last words, but Polly's got nothing. Frank keeps nodding off and then snapping awake, stiff-spined with terror, until he can locate her beside him. We can still go back. He has been saying this for days. Even in his sleep, he carries on this argument, and when he opens his eyes, he moves seamlessly from a dream fight to a waking one. Already his voice is far off, sealed away inside his suit. She pulls his forehead to her cheek, but his mask stops her short. They can only get within 3 inches of each other. The suit rubs against the vinyl car seat and makes a funny, crude noise, but they don't laugh. Polly would like to breathe in the smell of Frank's skin one last time, a smell like salt cut with something sweet, like when it rains in the city. But all she gets is the dry smell of plastic. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sonia Lawley, and I'm going to be reading a passage from my latest novel, Grown Up Pose. Anu relaxed her hands, only then realizing they were clenched. Neil and I were discussing how Anu's got herself a new boyfriend, he interrupted. Anu's stomach dropped. He was telling on her to his mother? Already, she asked. Is it that white man? So what if he's white, Auntie? Priya's cheeks flushed, and immediately Anu felt regret. She was not usually so vocal with her opinions. As Neil's girlfriend, she'd tried to ignore Priya's constant demands, her placations and opinions, the way she made and unmade everything they did, like a bed, like a chore. When they got married, she didn't ignore them. Rather, she obeyed them. Now she didn't have to, but she still wasn't used to the idea that she was allowed to do and say as she pleased. In their culture, you couldn't be honest with elders without disrespecting them. I'm sorry, Auntie, she said finally, sincerely. She met Priya's gaze. I didn't mean to snap at you. You mean every word, dear, except the promises you made to my son. Anu took a deep breath as she tried to remain calm. She was used to the guilt. It was the pain she was still coming to grips with. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kanesia Lubrin, and I will be reading from my new book of poetry, The Dysgraphist. Return number 18. For as long as we've had dreams, we've had rivers. For as long as we've had fears, we've been rivers. We've been legions held ransom for our thirst. We wake up ready to stay awake to the rush-wild innermost that time can offer us, to the weak old boats that have come to pick us up with rumors of our innocence, in sad, strong songs that pile up before the rain, the good pungency of wind through the corn, and once full creeks, grabbed guns, the vroom vroom of a crushed mood, coming back as you, and only you, please, you without helmet, full of song, full of wine, and just as you with sword, heavy with the ordination of mud, worn out of dream, to take up my request, to lower the blood pressure, keep alive a word for this problem and this dream. Thank you.
Please join me in welcoming our panelists for today, moderator Jael Richardson, with authors Taya Lim, Sonia Lawley, and Kanesia Lubrin.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate just this experience. This is our first time doing a panel like this and doing it on Zoom. For obvious reasons, we've been working to adjust to this new time and space. And we just appreciate your patience with us today. I know I'm sort of watching it, so for some of you, we may dip in and out. For others of you, it looked great, hopefully. But I'm really excited about this portion of our conversation and our evening. I'm going to just bring Taya back in, and then the four of us are going to have a chat for a little bit. While we're talking, feel free, there's a Q&A button either at the bottom or the top of your screen. Feel free to post questions in there that you'd like Kanesia or Sonia or Taya to answer. And when we get to a little bit later in the event, I'm going to dip into that box and pick some of my favorites, and we'll get going from there. But we have everybody here, at least audio-wise. And so I just want to ask a question of you. Maybe I'll start with you, Sonia, about how you're doing. And if any reading or writing is happening now. Is this a time where ideas are really flourishing, or is there sort of like a pause in that process?
I'm doing okay. I mean, it's up and down. I think that's the case for everybody. I'm incredibly privileged in that I do have the option of staying home, and that I have been able to keep my job and work from my kitchen table. So that's been good. I think that I've tried to not watch the news as much. I try and keep some balance in my day-to-day. And yeah, I think I just, like everybody, have had it to take some time out and not write and not work and not do anything. But I have tried to write and to use the silver linings that we do have a lot of time now. So I tried my best.
And Taya, what about you? How are things going for you in the writing and reading realm?
Well, I have my headphones in right now because serendipitously this session coincides with both my children's naps. So I have 2 kids under 4 at home, so there is not a lot of reading and writing going on. But there is a lot of thinking. And I think something that I've been thinking about a lot is kind of what the worth of my labor is as a writer, which is actually something I think about all the time, pandemic or otherwise. And I think artists have to think about it all the time because the system we live under doesn't have a meaningful way of valuing our labor. But what's struck me right now is that I see so many people having to consider the value of their labor right now in really awful ways, like people that I know whose labor seemed completely sure, now they realize their labor is conditional. So I think that's something that I think about all the time as an artist. I think about the strange sort of confluence between our work being so kind of up in the air and unquantifiable, and seeing that everyone else's work is that way too. And it's not pleasant, actually, to see everyone else struggling from the existential dread that we struggle from all the time. It's troubling, and I think the only thing that I hope is that when we get to the other side, that maybe we'll think differently about how we value labor in general.
Love that. Khadija, what about you?
Yeah, much like Taya, I think work on some level always factors into how I think about the world generally, because in our modern world, our whole entire lives is structured around this concept of work. We are born into a social, economic, spiritual, all of it, all of the structures. You go to church to learn how to be best useful. You go to school to learn how to be best useful. You go to everything, so it's this idea of work has been one of my preoccupations for a very, very long time. And in reading any of my works, you might see that kind of consumerist, work-centric machine at works somewhere, and this particular book that just came out, The Dysgraphist, my book of poetry, centers a lot around neoliberalism and what it does to our lives, right? And so I don't feel any immediate draw to a kind of urgency, I think, in trying to do something with my writing in that regard, because I literally just published a book about it. So serendipitously, let's say. And so I have been reading, I have been writing a lot of emails, writing a lot of correspondence between myself and students, because I'm still teaching online. And so, it's kind of interesting to be a poet in basically the same rhythms that you've always been a poet. It's really those things that trouble the world, that draws the poet in, right? And so we come at it through a kind of seeking of beauty and otherwise, So I feel very much at home, and it's troubling, it's very, very troubling. But yes, it's a lot to take in. I think I'm just more aware. I'm more aware right now than I was previously. And that's a lot of awareness to carry around. So I'd like to dish out some of it, if you don't mind.
Just share it. Share the wealth.
I would, yeah. Just send some packages and label
Well, I know.
them. Yeah,
Well, it's funny because before this happened, Kanisha, you and I went out for lunch, and I feel like you shared a lot of like your wealth of things that you were thinking of that I hadn't even been thinking of. So that sharing of the wealth, it really does happen when you talk. So thank you for sharing about that. I'm curious, especially for you and Sonia, you guys have books that have come out in the midst of this. And I find one of the things about isolation is that I'm really absent of other experiences. I'm really missing like what's really happening in even my neighbor's home, like what's going on. I'm missing that piece. And so I'm curious, as authors who have put out books in the midst of this, what has changed in maybe the way that you've been promoting the book? Is it all bad? Are there things that are good that are coming out of this? What do you think, Sonia?
It's been really mixed. You know, whenever I do feel happy, I feel a little bit guilty about feeling happy. I know that shouldn't be the case, but that's kind of how it's been. And then whenever I feel a little bit disappointed by, you know, this pandemic has affected me and my ability to come to a live fold of Ed in Kitchener, for example, or something like that. Again, a little bit of guilt as there's so much more going on in the world that we need to focus on, that this shouldn't matter, but it does. And so what I've tried to do is just focus on the silver linings. So, you know, the day my book came out on March 24th, I logged off work at 5 o'clock. I was gonna, you know, just watch some Netflix and have some wine, and then found out that my husband and friends and coworkers had planned a surprise Zoom launch for me, which was just, you know, wonderful. And it would never have happened if we weren't all online anyway. And it was really nice to celebrate with people from all over the world who had made time for that. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I feel like there's like a moment, like I should just hold this up for a minute, just, you know, to give a little bit. It's been a great book for me while I've been doing some yoga.
Thank you.
Very timely. And for you, Kanisha, too, doing your poetry. I'll also do the new book plug. Great spine. I have to say, in my in my bookshelf, it looks phenomenal, and it's also phenomenal to read. But yeah, how has the book launch experience been? Are there positives, or how are the disappointments? What's the world like for you putting out a book?
Well, I mean, since you brought up the spine, I will say an extra shout out to Leah Springate, who designed this phenomenal cover, and Sandra Brewster, whose art is on the cover of the book. I believe maybe a little too much that everything about the world that escapes human understanding is a lot greater than the things we think we have a grasp of. You know what I mean? And so, in a sense, I was not disappointed by what we had to do, because we had to respond to a world that made itself so real to us that we had to stop. You know, all the human things that we prize had to kind of grind to a halt. I was not disappointed at that. But of course, because the entire ecosystem of putting out a book, you know, you have proofreaders and designers and editors and everybody working behind the scenes to make books happen in the world. That's great testament to the power of language and the power of putting ink to paper and what that stuff does. So the broader ecosystem, I think, is still very much going along, you know, because I get messages from people who are reading the book, who are giving me their responses to the book. I think the book is actually reaching audiences that I could not have envisioned if this wasn't the world we're faced with now, you know. I'm finding that there's something to what is happening right now that kind of reminds us of that broader social and cultural ecosystem that books exist in. And so I'm not freaking out about this so much, but of course there's a lot troubling in the industry, just generally, because it has carried on in a manner that, you know, depends on a particular structure and a particular rhythm to that structure, and all of that is interrupted, right? And so that all of that is troubling. I think for me, as someone who studied publishing and understands the back room and how it works, yeah, it's a lot to be concerned about right now. But as a writer, if I'm speaking to you as a poet, the poetry is doing its work, you know, and so I'm not too concerned in that regard. I'm just, you know, we keep writing, we keep going after beauty, we keep going after insight, and I think that kind of thing will take care of itself. But the systems definitely are very much interrupted in some very profound ways. And I don't have a lot of language to give you around what that's doing right now.
I don't think that's true. I think you've given us a lot of language to think about. And, you know, just a technical point, if you're watching this and you haven't used Zoom for a panel before, or if this is your first time doing this, there are different ways to see what's going on. So you can change the view, and you can expand the view so that it takes up your whole computer, and you can change it if you're on a smaller device. So if you swipe to the right, you'll actually see all of us at the same time if you're only seeing one at a time. So I'll just make that plug there. Taya, I wanted to ask you, because your book is about a pandemic and came out a year and a half ago. I should actually say Taya was supposed to appear at Fold 2019. Mm-hmm. And I have to tell this story because there was this, like, we gave an invitation and there was this, like, maybe, I don't know, like there was this vagueness, like kept delay to saying yes. And then I saw her at an event and she's like, I'm pregnant. And she was due, like, I want to say it was like days before the festival or days after, I can't remember. But
yeah, and
you were
he
like,
came early, so yeah. So
yeah, I can still do it.
I know, and I was so excited to be invited, and then we couldn't say yes or no, and I was like, oh no, they're gonna think that I don't care. So, yeah.
But it was great. I'm glad
you learned, the Fold learned about my pregnancy, I think, before some of my close friends, because I was like, I can't let these people wait anymore.
Well, thank you. It was really fun to stay tuned to that. But your debut novel, An Ocean of Minutes, was about a pandemic. There's a pandemic that takes place in the book. And I'm curious about how you feel about the story and the book now that an actual pandemic, we're living through it. Because before that, it was like figurative, something we've never seen before. Do you look at the book differently now?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think I have these moments of like, oh dear, I called down a plague on us. I'm sorry. What did I do? You know, and I actually have an essay coming about this, hopefully next week in Guernica, so I'm going to try not to scoop myself too much. But I think there's things that I realize I got wrong. And one of the most meaningful things that I realized I got wrong, I thought it was really funny, Kinesia, what you just said about having more awareness and already being a person who's aware. Like, I thought I was aware, and this has been a strange reality check. But in the beginning of my book, I put my characters in a lot of jeopardy. That's kind of one of the rules of fiction, right? To create motivation, you put characters in jeopardy. So the pandemic starts, and I stranded them far from home. I made the credit card companies collapse. I gave one of them the virus. And I think what's been really stark to me in the midst of an actual pandemic is that I made things much more complicated than they needed to be. That actually, when there is a global emergency, things don't have to go wrong in a complex way for everything to go wrong, if you know what I mean. That all that really has to happen for working people to be in trouble is for their income to stop, basically, for 3, 4, 5 days. And I think it's been astounding to me how much more drama I thought there needed to be, when I guess the drama itself that we all live under is late capitalism, and it's dramatic enough, and it's actually very plain, the ways that I think that puts us all in great jeopardy. So that's one thing that I've sort of been reckoning with a lot, because I spent so many years kind of building this world and trying to think of all the things that would have to happen to, you know, endanger characters. And the novel itself is actually very much about kind of the long-term impact of a pandemic. So I thought I was being smart, and then I realized, oh, things are actually a lot worse than I thought they were, which is surprising. But one thing that, looking at the book that I'm like, okay, I got that right, is that the book is really at heart, all it's about is time. It's about being a time-bound being, and it's about trying to come to terms with a world that's irrevocably lost. And I think it's been striking to me how much, now that we're in a pandemic, that's all that we're doing, right? And all that we think about are things that seemed very kind of plain and ordinary at the time. Things like, going down the street for a drip coffee or sitting on a park bench. Things that now really seem kind of so profound and so meaningful. And our shared memories of those things. And that is like I said, that's really all my book ultimately is about. So I can sort of be like, well, I did get one thing right.
I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. I know there's 2 books I know of that are coming out this year that are that have pandemics in them. I don't know to what level. And so I'm really interested to see like pre-pandemic, post-pandemic literature and like how that changes, because it's a lot creepier with a lot less, like there's not people walking around in hazmat suits down the street, but it feels creepy still.
Yeah, it's almost worse. It's like kind of devastating in its silence. It's like the opposite from what a lot of pandemic writers expected. What are the books? Is it Salima Nawaz?
Salima's one, and then I think Catherine Hernandez.
Oh right, Catherine. Crosswinds.
Crosshairs.
We gotta plug those books.
Yeah.
And Stone also has a book coming about a pandemic.
Who is it? Who else?
And Stone.
Oh wow. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a panel for you, full 2021. But I'm curious about this idea of time and writing books that are, I think especially if poets respond immediately to what's happening. I feel like every poem you write, Kenesha, must have like an immediate something that launched it. But I know it's the same for books as well. I'm curious if you've ever found yourself, how time impacts the way you edit, essentially. Do you come across events and experiences, you write them in one moment and edit them 2 years later? Does that change the way the story functions, if that makes sense, the way the poem functions?
Well, I do write across genres. I write fiction, nonfiction, criticism, poetry. I've worked in theater as well. I've done multi-arts types of writing. And so for me, what I bend into is a kind of new vernacular for the thing, and it's about shape, it's about form. And for me, the thing that I'm responding to in writing, because writing is a way of thinking, really. It's at its core, it's a way to think through and along and beside. And so for me, poetry, there's always something immediate in the frequency of the language and what I'm trying to apprehend. And a lot of the times with poetry, it's really an exercise in misapprehension or even the failure to apprehend, right? Because I'm trying to give a new configuration to the thing that I've made myself available to somehow, right? And so for poetry, I think the editing happens in stages, right? So I draft all of my poems by hand, and then I edit on the computer. So I think that shift in the medium and the materials of that does something to the work. It goes a lot quicker when I turn my attention to editing on the computer. With writing with pen and paper, I am in a really slow, contemplative kind of rhythm. With fiction, it's quick in a way, because what I do is I think about the world of the story, which is very different than poetry. You're just apprehending a moment, right? You're available to a moment and you apprehend that somehow. With fiction, you have to build a whole entire world to hold the thing. And so I do a lot of thinking before I actually write fiction. And so editing is a particular kind of relationship to time, and things change and they will enter the story somehow. They will enter the work based on mood, based on deadlines, based on, the different things that you might be obsessed with in whatever moment. But the world of narrative is not that forgiving, because in narrative, in story, you promise something and you got to deliver it by the end. Not so with poetry. Poetry is very different. You can slip in and out, and make yourself more available to surprise, I think, in a way that narrative doesn't allow, right? And so it's an interesting question you ask, Jael. Yeah, it's a very interesting question.
What about you, Sonia? I ask because I've been working on a novel for a long time, and I feel like editing it 8 years after it started is making me like, whoa. And I'm curious, Sonia, if that happens for you with your books, is there a moment that starts it, and then in the editing process, do you feel like it happened a while back and time has sort of impacted the way you edit and shape it?
No, I think I've had a little bit of different experience, because for my books, I'm writing more in women's fiction and in romance genre. I'm less so building a world as so building a character and a journey. So for my main characters are always very flawed women looking for themselves and looking for love. And I think that's more of a timeless question. And time can definitely impact that. I'm thinking about, I'm editing my third book right now. And I'm thinking, wow, should I make my edits and think about 2020 as it's actually happening? But I'm not really sure what's going to happen yet. So for me, I'm choosing not to address that at this point, because I just don't know what the answer is.
I know we don't know the way out. So I find like planning, I feel like it's like when some people set novels and they're like, I don't want cell phones to be in place, so I'm just going to set it in like whatever the year before cell phones became really popular were. I feel like this could be like, I don't want to deal with the pandemic. I'm going to set it in 2021 or 2019.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like nobody's going to be set in 2020.
Yeah.
I feel that in both of your books, there's these characters that are very vivid and very vibrant. And so I'm nosy. I'm going to be nosy here. Are these people that you come across in your everyday life and you're like, I am turning her into the central character in my book? Do you borrow from like the people that you know and just disguise it?
I do, yeah. In my first book, I wasn't so mysterious about it. I based the grandmother, who's the nosy, loving, involved, sassy grandmother trying to get her granddaughter married off before she's 30. I totally just borrowed that from my real life grandmother. And I took all of her flaws and I took all of her strengths and I put it in there. For this second book, I tried to distance myself more, and I tried to borrow different pieces from family members and from friends, because there is this universal story that so many South Asian women feel, that we are, we're strong and independent and we have a mind of our own, and we just resent the fact that our community or our families expect certain things from us. And it's so hard to try and, respect that and want to be a good daughter and want to be a good person and honor all the sacrifices that came before for, our immigrant parents and grandparents. But at the same time, we recognize that, it is 2020 and we need to live our life the way that we see fit. So, yeah.
I like that. I have not finished Grown Up Pose yet. I'm in the middle of it and like savoring it in a very good way.
Thank you.
I'm glad there was no spoilers there. Very excited.
I'll let you find out what happens.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always thinking about what we've read and how that shaped who we are as writers and how that shaped what we're doing. And so I'm curious about what you were reading and writing, maybe. I wasn't writing as early as some others, but what you were reading in particular, and whether the writing you do now is a continuation of that, sort of a building on those blocks that you consumed, you read, or whether it's sort of like in opposition, in sort of that, I'm not going to fit this mold, I'm going to be outside in this mold. Are you continuing with the things that you read, or did what you read sort of inspire you to go in a different direction?
So to be honest, is that for?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So when I was growing up and, an avid reader, I read everything. And it wasn't until, I got older and the conversation about inclusivity and diversity even became a thing that I realized that I never saw myself. I'm a pretty, you know, romantic person. As soon as a new Netflix rom-com comes out, I'm the first one to watch it. And it just boggled my mind that, you know, I didn't even realize that I never saw myself and my experiences on TV or in art or in movies or in entertainment or anything. It's really only started to change now. And so I guess when I started writing, I was trying to write what I never had. I wanted to write about, okay, yeah, it's a little bit of a fluffy rom-com, but you know what? Every time that we fall in love, we have a nosy auntie or a mom and all this cultural baggage that comes with it. And we cannot go about our life and have these journeys without addressing that.
I think a lot of the books that I read, I think that most spoke to me, especially kind of in my formative years, like I was really wild about George Orwell and Virginia Woolf and E.M. Forster. And I realized at some point, probably when I was in my early 20s, that none of those books had been written for me. That in fact, my person, like all of who I was actually unimaginable to those writers. Like it wasn't like they were actively not trying to write for me, like I was invisible to them. And really my experiences didn't matter to them. And I think in a way, what that did to my writing was it made me very like obstinate. Like I was kind of like, oh, you're gonna say this isn't my story? Well, guess what? It is my story. And I think I really wanted to find ways to look at a lot of the themes that came from books like that are kind of in some ways about kind of the eternal human experience, or what it means to be mortal, what it means to have relationship, what it means to have profound experiences, to be a philosophical being. And I think I wanted to figure out how can I make it really clear that those stories are actually they're about me, Buster, you know, so, and people like me. And I think that's where I think a lot of it came from, like a real pushiness, you know.
Well, for me, I relish in having become aware that story and language predates all of the formal structures that have been put in place to disseminate them, to approve them, etc. So I had a really rich childhood in language and in story. So a lot of it was folk tales, a lot of it were, you know, folk songs, you know, a lot of the oral traditional storytelling that happens in the Caribbean. And then, of course, by the time I got to books, and a lot of the books were not, as Taya has and Sonia have pointed out, they were not explicitly for me. But that never really troubled me so much, because what I really enjoyed was being in language and being in story and having that particular place in the world to enrich my imagination. And so when I did believe that I could maybe write books, my focus shifted, of course. Yeah, as it should, because now what you're trying to do is what Dion Brand says, as writing from the center of your life. Yeah, and because of the vast generosity of imagination that I somehow got through all of these routes, for me, that writing is about expanding the possibilities of imagination in the world. You know, that's what it is. And so my stories don't need the market's approval. It does not need the formal structures of education to approve it. And so I write from that place. I write the thing I must write, you know? And so that sort of very long tradition of people writing what they have to write has been around for forever, you know? And for me, it was when I read Dion Brand's work. That's really, really, really when I felt pulled into my own, you know? There was something simultaneously spiritual, psychological, intellectual, emotional that happened in that one instant that convinced me that I could probably do this work. And I hold on to that. I hold on to that forever. And so this is even in my own capacity as a writing instructor. It's really about getting students to see through a lot of the noise so they can find that place to write from the center of themselves and the center of their lives.
Hi guys, it's Amanda.
Amanda.
Jumping in here. Jael just got booted off for a second, but she's probably trying madly to get back on. So I'm just going to pop in with a question, actually from the audience, going off of what you said, Kinesia. Mark Blair was wondering, and this can apply to everybody, given what you just said, do you write for others, and do you write to share your story, and is it sort of a bit of both, I guess, like what you were saying? Can you guys maybe talk a little bit about that in terms of who you write for, and I guess what you imagine for your stories? Like, you start writing for yourself. Taya, you were talking about wanting to see yourself in the stories that you had read before. Sonia, you were saying the same thing. And then from there, how do you see your stories going out in the world and affecting others?
Well, I think that I had a writing teacher once who described it as everybody has an ideal audience and everybody has an enemy audience. And I thought that was really comical. I think I always tell my students, it sounds like so hokey, but you have to write the story that's in your heart. That's kind of all that is to it. And I think for a lot of writers, that does wind up writing themselves into existence in one way or another, even writers who probably are very well represented. But I think one thing that has struck me about having published a book that I was lucky enough to find a readership is you can actually never anticipate the kind of people who are really going to take your writing into their hearts and into their lives, and that's something that's very magical, and the things that people will pick up on and the things that are meaningful to them. So I think maybe just I think that for me, like it's a strange thing. It's like, it's hard, just as it's hard for me to remember my life before I had children, it's hard for me to remember how I thought about it before my book was published. It's harder now to think about who did I think would read this, because now I know who did read it, and it's so beyond anything I could have imagined, which is, you know, a gift, really.
Mm-hmm. Sonia, Kinesia, what about you?
Yeah, I agree. I wrote this story initially for me, and then over time it's become something else, and it's been surprising to see who read it. I thought it would just be read by, you know, South Asian women in their 20s and 30s who hadn't seen themselves represented before, but actually a lot of women and men and everyone, and it's been really rewarding.
I don't think about audience when I write. For me, that always seemed a kind of artificial constraint to put on the work. I make myself available to the work that I'm trying to write. I am thinking, you know, it's like I said, writing is primarily a way of thinking for me. And the joys and all the copious gifts of imagination that come along with that. And of course, all of the stuff that's a pain in the rear also. But I think in terms of audience, the book will find its reader. I think I might have this maybe naive trust that the book will find its reader. Of course, I am centering particular experiences in the book. I am centering particular languages, modes of speaking, syntax, vernacular, all of that fun stuff that I find so much fun. Those materials are at work in a particular way, and I think there are going to be people who respond to that. And of course, there are going to be people who are in the enemy audience that Taya was talking about a little bit earlier. But I'm not primarily concerned with the thing we call audience, because I find that a limiting concept.
Jael, you're back, I see.
I am back. Hello, everyone. I'm so glad everybody else is good.
Welcome back.
Here now.
Hey, how's it going? Everything went is no big deal. Nothing was good.
Did you fall into an ocean of minutes?
No, we sat in total silence until you returned. Yeah, we haven't said anything. We just staring at each other.
All of you were frozen, and then I was like talking, and everything was fine, and then I was gone and couldn't come back. So, yeah. But I'm here. Thanks, Amanda, for stepping in. I hope the question just continued, and I hope I'm not taking it in a direction that it wasn't going in already. But I'm really curious about the labels that are assigned to books and the way that those labels function in as it comes to book sales and book life. And I'm thinking in particular about the ways in which, I know, Kanisha, you write a number of different things, but I think for poetry, as well as sci-fi, as well as romance genre, in Canada, it seems like there's sort of this central canon, this central kind of literature. And I'm curious if you're thinking about that as you create work, as if you're responding to that, if you embrace the sort of labels and titles that are placed on your book, or sort of rejecting the places that that your books are categorized or not categorized, if that makes any sense.
I can say something about this. I never really thought about that too much before I was published on a large scale. I kind of, for example, I felt that I wrote in hybrid genre, and I was very happy to do so. I realized with some horror after my book came out that you can write in hybrid genre, but the market will put you in one slot. And so my book was actually primarily put into like romance adjacent. Like one of the big comps for my book was The Time Traveler's Wife. And that I understand that as a marketing decision, and the decisions that my team meant. I had like really wonderful editors, but nonetheless that I think actually harmed the book, because as much as I was very lucky, and I think there were other things that happened that raised the profile for the book that was really great, but actually I never thought of it as a love story. Of course there is a love story, but I actually thought of it primarily as an immigration tale. And because I also chose to write about immigration, but loosed from any particular ethnic group, because I was also interested in that, because my own immigration experience wasn't connected to any particular ethnic group. I think that also confused the market. So I think there's a part of me that wonders, like, would I have found different kind of readers who would have, like, would I have found a different kind of readership if the book hadn't been marketed that way? And I love hearing that, Kanisha, that you say, I don't think about audience, I don't think about the market, because I think because I had that experience, now I'm like quite stressed about that. I'm like, oh, like next time round, how do I make sure that the book is packaged in a way that kind of reflects my artistic vision? And I think anyone who's involved in the sales of books is like, be quiet, we don't care about your artistic vision, not because they're cruel or evil, but because, you know, like it's a difficult industry and they have to do what they can. So yeah, so I don't know. I think I'm sort of at a crossroads. I'm like, should I just write something that's a single genre next time? I don't really know. I'd be curious to hear what other people have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had a bit of a similar experience. I didn't necessarily think of my book in a particular genre when I started writing it, and then very quickly it was sort of categorized as women's fiction, even romance. And I think that there were a lot of benefits, you know, the way it was packaged, marketed, the way the cover is. It definitely attracted romance readers, were very voracious readers. It did get a lot of good attention that way, and I was very grateful. But on the other hand, I think it did limit the audience in another way, because, you know, because it has a bright illustrated cover, people looking at it might not expect that it actually does deal with some very dark and deep things that a lot of South Asian women are going to resonate with it, but people who don't necessarily read romance books. So yeah, mixed bag.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the reasons why I say I don't think about the market or audience when I'm writing is because it really doesn't factor into the thing that I'm trying to create, because the thing I'm trying to create, hopefully, is a kind of a live, mutable material that in its complexity will not fit into these reductions in categorization. And I think that's true for writing creative works generally. But I think the thing that gets lost in a lot of this talk around market and audience and things like that is that books don't function like commercial goods, right? There are certain genres that maybe fit a little bit easier into those formulas, like romance novels, thrillers, horrors, that kind of thing. You work with a formula, you deliver it, and based on X demographic, you can maybe plan to market X number of books in a particular place, etc. But books, by their very nature, resist the supply and demand model of the market, of the capitalist market, because nobody knows what's the next book Taya's gonna write. No one knows what's the next book Jael will write or Sonia will write. No one knows. They just know maybe they loved your first book or your second book, or, you know. And so because the book market consistently operates in that model that really doesn't suit it, it's a kind of Ouroboros. You know, we're going to be talking around these particular issues. But I think, Jael, the question you're asking is maybe more closely related to what can be understood as the literary tradition of what we like to think of as Canadian literature. That was doing a particular kind of work. There was a very particular kind of government intervention in funding a kind of national literature. And now we have sort of evolved away from that. And so in a sense, it's unavoidable because this is what writing does, right? Writing is the kind of material that operates on a level of almost a kind of nebulous reality around how books meet their audiences and the kind of work a book does in the world, right? And so I think for me, you know, thinking of the market in these sort of clinical terms doesn't allow me to factor in the work that writing actually does, why I love a book, you know. I think in spite of all that, because of the hundreds of years of book making and book marketing that has happened in publishing, and we continue to persist in these systems that don't really serve the fullness of the work, is actually testament to that quality, that sort of nebulous quality that I'm talking about. So I don't know. I think I write the thing that I need to write, and because a particular history has given me over to that, and a particular life has given me over to the things that I need to write. And so I think it's almost always a mistake to write through something called the market. You know, it's a bizarre thing to me. My mind doesn't work like that.
Well, and I also think it's a dangerous thing too, because I think that in some ways publishing misunderstands their own market sometimes. Like there's sort of, I heard somebody say, it was like one of those business shows, and he said, you know, if I'm writing for the market, then I'm already behind, essentially, right? If you're creating something that's for now, then by the time the book comes out, it's already behind in commercial speak. And I think writing the stories that come to you is one side, but the challenge we do face, I think, as writers is the boxes that then once your story is done, whether it's the cover or the title or whatever, that's the challenge of constantly pushing for what the authentic story really is.
And I think the thing that I think is stressful for me and probably for anybody else is that the market is this horrifying tool that is so much more narrow than the work that we create, but it's also the means through which we make our living. So I think, I would never write for the market, but at the same time, it's like the market is going to decide what happens to you in a way. And I think it's that tension that I'm always sort of worried about. It's almost like as a working artist, you have to work with kind of a bifurcated mind. You have one mind that thinks about the writing and has to ignore the market so that you can create work that is, I think, authentic, and that isn't kind of, you're not writing like a Twilight follow-up, I think, in 2020 or something like that. But then on the other hand, I do think either you just are like wildly lucky, or you do manage to find some way to make the market work for you so that you can continue to have a living as a writer, so that you can write more books, right? Because I think this is a depressing note during a depressing time, but I think the truth of the matter is that if your book doesn't sell, it's very difficult then to get a publisher to buy the next one.
Yeah, but you know, the truth of the matter is most books don't sell. You know, so it's
liberation.
Right. So maybe yes, there's some luck in it, but there are actual structures in the background, actual machines in the background at work that very actively produce what we like to what might on the other end seem like luck, right? And so in that sense, I think it's interesting to think about the market, you know, as the kind of proto artificial structure that we then lay on top of books, you know? And so part of the problem, I think, is how short a book season is, and the sheer number of books that come out in a season, and those particular mechanisms, those machines that we're talking about, just can't keep up with the sheer volume of books that come out. And I think for people, for a species like we are, a language species who makes books, that in itself is a kind of mind-altering reality. The millions and millions of books that come out in a given period, you know, like in 5 years, you just can't keep up. And so there are actual machines very actively making decisions that would appear to us like luck on the other side. And so yeah, it's kind of it's an interesting maze.
Yeah. I want to take a question from the question box, if I can call it that. And I want to talk about it because I think it's in line with these questions about authentic and about how to stay true to our own stories and also writing other stories. You know, the person who asked the question talked about being mixed race and like, how do you write authentic characters? But I think it's also important to understand that any character that's different from us is different from us, right? So how do you create really authentic characters who are maybe culturally similar or maybe culturally different? And is there sort of a different process in those two categories?
Oh, Taya, were you gonna?
Oh, I will say something, but
sure, I'll go after you.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm reading the question in the question box, and I have a lot of mixed feelings about this because I do feel like people should write what's true to them, and if what's true to them is exploring a character that's a little bit different, then sure, as long as they're doing a good job, as long as they're being thoughtful. But my question is, what, you know, lots of people write and we try and get published, what books and what voices are actually being amplified? So, you know, if we have a book about, you know, I don't know, it's a very complicated question. And I guess for me, I write what I know because that feels true. And it wouldn't feel true to me to write someone who's not from my background because I don't think I could do a very good job at understanding it.
So I in general always have to write people who are not from my background because not many people are from my background. I would only be able to write autobiography and it would be embarrassing, I think, people who are from my background. And I just say that not just because I'm mixed race, but also because I moved around a lot. Like I have kind of a strange ethnic national experience. But that actually created panic for me when I first started writing. I published a novella with Invisible Publishing in 2007, and it's in like a nameless city, and nobody really has a clear race. Like that was how I dealt with it at the time. I just tried to kind of like hide all that stuff. Now I think what I think about a lot is the fact that, number one, the way that you write authentic, good characters is just simply, it's a rule that applies no matter what the character's race or nationality or gender or sexuality is that you make sure that everybody has an agenda. Like there shouldn't be any characters in your book who think that they are a secondary character in somebody else's story, right? Everybody has something they're trying to get. And that's sort of the most basic rule. But the other thing I think to think about is that we are all shaped by our environments. We are all shaped by our, like those things I just said, by our gender, by our race, by our level of ability, no matter whether we have a great deal of privilege or no privilege. We're shaped by those things, but we're not defined by them. I think that you read a lot of really well-intentioned work by writers of color where the only motivation that the characters of color have is their ethnic experience. And I always think that that's as problematic as actually a really racist character written by a white writer. So I think characters are defined by their social milieu. I think about that with all my characters. It doesn't matter whether they're white, it doesn't matter if they're Vietnamese. I try to make sense of how their race sort of affects who they are. But it doesn't define them. And they think about lots of other things than, you know, their ethnic identity or their sexuality or things like that.
Yeah, and just to echo fair. I think there are certain things that one ought to be really wary of. And one of them is wanting to speak for. Avoid that. Because you will end up inevitably in this sort of archetypal trap, right? Because to speak for is to work from a place of authority that will always be too limiting for the task you set yourself up for, right? And so you're not writing archetypes, you're not writing stereotypes, you're writing a character, and that character needs to be imbued with a certain degree of sociality, because we exist in the world and you write through the world, right? And they have experiences, they have a certain kind of psychology, they have a certain kind of relationship to the story, through the story, about the story. And so if you're serving a character, the goal always is to arrive at a certain complexity, right? And I think one of the ways to avoid that is to not speak for, is to let the character be a character, and to work in the service of the story. And of course, to have a kind of exchange between, if it's a single, you can write a story with a single character, and maybe that character is not anything like you, right? And I think that's okay, because really, if you're doing it right, the result will show a certain kind of sociality, right? And so it's always, what are you trying to do? What's the intention with doing something like that? Because if it's just about experience, then you sort of atrophy the story anyway, before you even start to write. Because what you're trying to do is transform the materials of the story into a piece of art, and to elevate it somehow, yeah? And so when I say don't speak for, what I'm saying is don't just sit in experience and present experience as though it is a be all end all, and that's the only knell that you hear, right? And then so things kind of get atrophied, things get really reductive and stereotypic that way. So I'm always trying to write characters who are complex in their sociality, and they can arrive in a story at different levels, with particular kinds of insight, with various shapes, with various orientations. And so for me, I'm always writing after what I don't know, right? If I sit in what I know, then I end up making a lot of mistakes, you know? And so, yeah, it's an interesting thing, because what we're really talking about is how legible the character is, the person is speaking, what the voice is doing. And this idea of legibility, for me, makes more sense as a kind of opacity. If we don't speak definitively for, you know, that kind of thing.
I think, yeah. I mean, one of the things too that I think about a lot is when you're creating a character that's outside of your experience, it's about asking lots of questions about what's needed, what's familiar to you, why is it familiar to you, how does it relate to things you've seen, how can it be different from what you've seen. I think those are really important things to be asking, because oftentimes when we think about creating a female character or a trans character or a character of a particular color, they come with all these associations we've seen on TV or we've read in other books, and you really have to push against that and think, you know, what is it that the character really needs, and that sort of thing too. One of the questions from the question and answer box was also about MFAs, or Masters of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. And just so maybe if you could just share as our last question a little bit about your background in writing, in terms of formal background, if at all, and whether or not what about that felt important, or maybe what about that isn't important, you know, that sort of, a lot of people think that they might be important, but maybe it isn't. I know for me, the thing that was most important for my MFA was connections that I made, and I could have done that without
paying all that money, but like what sort of your formal background, if any, and how has that helped, or what things have helped? Yeah, Sonia, maybe start us off.
Sure. For me, yeah, I think that doing an MA in publishing and writing, the connections was the big thing. I did not study, I mean, I did a few years of English literature, but my background was in law, and writing and trying to work in publishing was just a completely new experience and a new journey for me. So that's something that definitely I needed and was privileged to have access to. And because of that, I was able to sort of help myself down the publishing journey, and now I work in publishing as well. And it's definitely not something that everybody needs. I think that a lot of the actual teaching of how to write and finding my own voice, I think that could have happened elsewhere, but I don't regret it. I'm very happy with that was part of what happened for me.
So I did an undergrad degree, not in writing, and I actually had no idea that you could go to school for creative writing, which I think was really good, because if I had known, I would have done that, and I don't know that that would have been helpful for me at the stage I was at then. And then I kind of stumbled around for a long time, working in restaurants, working as like in communications, and then I found out that you could go to school for creative writing, and I wound up doing an MFA in the US at the University of Houston. My MFA was transformative for me. Connections is one way to think about it, but really it was the first time in my life that I had spent time with other writers who were really serious about it beyond anything else, who weren't sort of like, well, if I can make time on a Saturday afternoon, I'll write a story. Like, these were people who, you know, every single day at the same point, they got up and they did their work. They didn't go out and have dinner with you. They didn't stay out late. Like, if that was their writing time, that was their writing time. And I'd never been around people who took it so seriously. That sounds like I don't know, kind of a shallow thing, but it really made all the difference to me. And people who pushed through even when it wasn't fun, even when it wasn't sort of enjoyable or glamorous. And that's so much of writing. And I now teach in a creative writing program. I teach in the undergraduate publishing creative writing program at Sheridan College, and which I think is also a great program. But I have to say that I don't think anybody needs to do a creative writing program. I think you go into one of those programs when you've sort of gotten as far as you can on your own, and they can be really, really useful and very meaningful. But they're a fairly new invention. People have been telling stories for like thousands and thousands of years. If it's something that for whatever reason is not realistic for you, or you feel like, I think I'm doing okay, but do I need to do an MFA? Then I would say no, like just keep doing it your own way. Not anyone needs to do that.
Awesome. Well, that is, I think, a wrap for today. I'm just trying to figure out if we're going to do the Kahoot. Amanda, if you could log into Kahoot, and I will do it from this perspective. I'll coach you through it in a second. But maybe David, if you want to come on and wrap things up, I just want to say a personal thank you to Sonia, to Taya, to Kenita, just for joining us here this afternoon, for, as we said in our practice session, being our guinea pigs for the tech side of things, and just making sure, you know, we're getting ready for the festival. Next weekend is our first preview event. It's an evening event, and then we get into our events like a whole weekend of this. So I'm really grateful to the three of you for joining us today. I'm really grateful to all of you who tuned in and stay tuned in the whole time to hear us chat. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
Tuning in.
And Tia and everybody.
Yeah, and Sonia, so nice to meet you. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you to everyone for being here. Thanks for joining us. That was excellent. We're going to transition to our closing remarks and trivia. So even though our authors are leaving, we don't want you to go anywhere. Thank you to the Kitchener Public Library and Imaginet for sponsoring. Please follow us online on Twitter and Instagram. You can register for Fold sessions for free at thefoldcanada.org, which I highly recommend you doing. Go to the website and you can see all the sessions that we have coming up. There's workshops and talks just like this one. While everything is free, you can donate to the Fold Foundation at Canada Helps. Copies of the author's books are available through Another Story Bookshop at anotherstorybookshop.ca, And we would just recommend if you have an independent bookshop in your community that you support them at this time.